this YouTube recording. So you may receive the message. So it's on live now. Thank you, Charlie, for your email. I will just check again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do you post this on YouTube, or is there a way that I can repost it on my Facebook when it's done?
It
This
is on
meeting?
YouTube. Yeah, it is on YouTube.
Okay. Because I like to share meetings like this on my Facebook page.
Uh-huh. Okay. I just sending you email. Okay. Varuni, you're okay?
Yes, I am. Little bit struggling with the seat.
Okay.
Just trying to sit on the floor today.
Okay. Good, good.
I don't like sitting on the chair.
Oh, we have Arjun joined as well. Okay.
Yes.
Evening, Arjun.
Good evening, sir.
How is the weather down south?
Rains, rain, and wind.
No different to Scotland.
I was suggesting to David,
Yes.
I don't know, you and David perhaps could combine together to try and set up a retreat once in 3 months or once in 6 months, just for one day in 3 months.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a request. And it
Okay.
will be very much appreciated, I'm sure, by a lot of people.
Uh-huh. Okay. Record it.
Thank you.
Right. I think this is the time for us to get ready and journey to the Buddha Voyage. Bhante is already here. So good evening, Bhante,
Yes,
again.
peace and joy, everybody. Peace and joy.
So I'll pass it on to Bhante. Thank you for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn. So you can hear me. Everybody can hear me. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, that's great. Well, let us start with those refuges and precepts. Now, maybe some of you, wouldn't consider yourselves Buddhists. That's fine. You can take them in the spirit of just a sense of confidence in the Buddha and the Dharma just for this session. Or you can just listen. You don't have to take them. So I'm going to share. Is anybody who there's some people who don't know them? Bim, Arjun, do you know? Drew? I don't know whether you know the refuge and priest. I mean, I can share the
I
page.
think sharing would be much better, Bhante.
Okay, here we go. Yeah. Okay. So I'll scroll down as we, if I can. How do I scroll down? Oh yeah, there we are. Good. Okay. So you can bow in whichever way you wish. Just bow your head, or if you're on the floor, you can do a full bow. It doesn't really matter. Bodang pujami. Dhammang pujami. Sanghang pujami. Namo tassa bhagavato harahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato harahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato harahato samma sambuddhassa. Bodhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi bodhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi bodhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Hanati pata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Adina dana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Kame sumi chachara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Musawada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Suramaraya majapamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Idame sila magapalanyana pachayohotu. Having taken the refuges and precepts, reminding ourselves of the farewell quote from the Buddha, strive diligently for your liberation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, I shall stop that share. Now I have, before we start the meditation, Dharma has asked me a question about the fourth part of the Satipatthana discourse. So I'd like to see if I can share another page so that you can see the actual discourse. Okay. So now here you see contemplation of the Dharmas. How a bhikkhu abide. How does a bhikkhu abide contemplating Dharmas as Dharmas? This word Dharma is referring to mental objects. So sometimes it's translated as phenomena. So that's the word for mental objects in philosophy. Phenomena, right? So we have certain philosophers in the West like Husserl. Actually, Husserl was the founder of phenomenology. He was the first Western philosopher to actually look at how the mind works. It's a bit, whereas the Buddha was doing that 2,500 years ago. But the Buddha, of course, is not just saying just be aware of what's often, not just to be aware of what's happening. He gives us something to look at, to investigate. So the first of these are these five hindrances, which I'm sure you all know. Anything to do with desire, wrong desire, ill will, lethargy, drowsiness, agitation, worry, and then uncertainty. That's a nice way to put it. Usually it's translated as doubt. Anxiety, that's what doubt produces. Fear and anxiety. So I think in Sharma's email, if I remember rightly, It's not as though you're looking out for these things. You don't sit down and say to yourself, well, now I shall look at a hindrance. I shall look at desire. When you're sitting in meditation, you're not doing anything. You're not interfering. You're not trying to achieve anything. You're just watching, right? You've come off the mind. You've come off the heart. You've come off the body. And what you find, of course, is that the body offers sensations and feelings, the heart with its emotions and moods, and the mind with its thinking and imaginings. Right? And you're just letting it happen, right? It's a choiceless awareness. You're not choosing what to look at. But when we see one of these come up, then our job is to feel what they're doing, see what they're doing, and allow them to the energy to arise and pass away. That way, the habit that's creating that is being disempowered. And eventually, when we get to arahatship, they won't happen. There may be just traces of them in the mind, but they won't catch our attention so much. Then there's contemplating the Dharma as Dharmas, abides contemplating that. So basically, that's the refrain, right? Which is referring back to the hindrances. So that's his usual refrain, right? He abides. You're sitting there contemplating this, understanding it, yeah, and you're beginning to see that they all arise and pass away, and then you begin to see that there are these dhammas simply establishes it to the extent that there's just this bare awareness of them, knowledge, and a way of looking at them with that question mark. What is it? Yeah. So that's that refrain comes after them all. So the second thing we're looking at is the 5 aggregates. Right. So see again, such is form, such is feelings in the body, sensations in the body. This is arising and passing away. Yeah. Sometimes we're aware of that. We're just aware of being of the body. Sometimes we're aware of just being in an emotional state. Sometimes we're aware of the mind creating images. Then there's the 6 bases. Those are the 6 sense bases: the ear, nose, tongue, body, and of course the mind itself. So if you're sitting and you hear a car outside, then the attention moves to that sound, and you experience it. That's all. In just experiencing it, you're experiencing it arising and passing away. Okay. And when it says here, abandoning the fetter, that's what happens. We get caught up in these sounds. So you might hear a car, and you might be saying to yourself, if that car hadn't passed, I'd be fully liberated now. It's completely disturbed me, or something like that. So it's also catching our relationship to these various 6 bases. And then there's the 7 facts of enlightenment. See, so when we feel peaceful, we acknowledge, oh, that's tranquility, peace, tranquility, calmness in the body, calmness in the mind. Now you're not trying to engender these; they arise, and you accept them. You see. And every so often, the 7 factors just arise with you. So when you're concentrated, then you recognize, this is a factor of enlightenment. And that's what you're developing. And then the 4 noble truths. You're aware when suffering arises. And we'll be saying more about that after we finish talking about suffering and how we create suffering through this wrong relationship of desire. And that there is an end to suffering, and that there's a path leading to it. Yeah. So that comes right that's number 4 of the 4 areas of investigation. The first being the body, the second feeling, and the third mental states. Okay, so just in answer to your question, Dharma, when it says, when it talks about the Dhammas, it's talking about the contents of the mind, but specific. The Buddha is specifically pointing us to these contents. Okay. Are there any immediate questions on that? Because we can now sit for a while. No, that was perfectly clear and wonderful, was it? Fantastic.
Bhante, can you share this on the chat, please? The URL to this site, please. Is that okay?
The URL to this particular,
Yes,
to this
please.
particular, this is Sutta Central. Have you come
Okay.
across that website?
No.
Oh, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. What I'll do, I can copy that, stick it in where are my chat line. Just a minute. Here we go.
Thank you, Bhante.
Where am I? Oh, there we are, of course. Can you see it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's available.
Okay. Now that particular website, sort of central, you'll see it's quite remarkable. Not only are all the discourses and the agamas, the ones that are only in Chinese from a school that existed at the same time as Theravada in India. The what was it called? Do you know, Ajahn? I can't remember it. It's oh dear, it'll come to me all of a sudden. And that's right. Thank you. The Savastivadin, and all their scriptures are only preserved in Chinese, so they've all been translated now. So you can, and you might have come across Bhikkhu Analio. So he's written books on how they match the one to the other. The Dharma is always the same, but the discourses are different. Yeah. Okay. So should we do a bit of sitting? And then I just want to say a little bit about dukkha. Okay. So make sure that, your posture is supporting the practice. It's mainly the spine, to make sure the spine is its natural curvature and to put energy in it to lift yourself up, you see. And then, just 1 second. Okay. So we'll sit for a little while. I think it's half an hour, correct? Okay. But remember, just make sure that energy is there in the spine, lifting it up. Spend a moment just relaxing the brow, eyes gently closed, the jaw, lips together, teeth apart. And the shoulders, if there's tension there, give them a squeeze. And then just resting the attention on where you feel the breath most. If a noting word helps the mind or stops the mind from wandering, you might find it a useful technique. So rising, falling at the nostrils, in, out, out. And just wait for that calmness to come. So 5 minutes on, hopefully the body feels more rested. As the body rests, the heart begins to rest. As the heart begins to rest, the mind begins to rest. Then when you feel that steadiness of attention, somewhat, just whatever draws your attention within that field of awareness, observe it, feel it. You don't do anything, don't try and change anything. a moment's reflection. Just bring to mind something that happened during that time. One of the hindrances, maybe dullness, lethargy, restlessness. How do you deal with it? Or it could have been that you were very happy, tranquil, peaceful. What did you do? How did you use it? And you can formulate a resolution from that. So if it's dullness and lethargy, you can say things like, as soon as I feel that, next time I'll open my eyes. If you felt very peaceful and calm, I'll use that to investigate impermanence. And opening the eyes gently. I was going to just say a few words about dukkha, just this word, dukkha. You'll notice that other religions, well, I'm thinking mainly of the desert religions. So that's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They all have a God, a personal God, right? Who beats them up when they've done something wrong and gives them presents when they've done something right. But not always. Sometimes they just beat them up. I remember, because I was brought up a Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I remember we were told that God made us to love him, which is okay. And you have free will. If you don't have to love him. It's an act of free will on our part. But if you don't, you go to hell. So it was a bit, wasn't much of a choice, really. But there are three religions that don't have a personal God: Buddhism, Jainism, and Taoism. But all these religions point to something which is transcendent of the body, heart, and mind. That's the point where we, shall we say, connect. Which is different from the secular religions, let's call them that: communism, socialism, and liberalism, or Nazism, or national socialism, and neoliberalism. All these are really very secular religions which have an aim as a human being. And therefore, when you die, that's it, you're done. Doesn't offer much hope. Okay, so the etymology of the word, for those who are interested, seems to come from the tribes who came down from the north of India into India, and they would talk about the axle on their chariots as being not right. The space wasn't right. So if it wasn't right, there'd be a bumpy ride. That was dukkha. And if it was good, it was sukha. Later on, of course, these words took on a different meaning. There's no word in English that covers this. It's translated, it used to be translated as suffering, but that's really too much of an accent on pain. It's now much more translated as unsatisfactoriness. And Tanisaro, whom some of you might know, translates it as stress, which is fair enough. But I think we could just say life. Life is dukkha in the sense of the comedian. Life's hard, and then you die. So now the Buddha makes this distinction, and this goes right back to the first discourse, which of course is a formalized way, a formalized discourse based on what he was teaching, based on this idea of dukkha. And he says that there are two pursuits that are not to be pursued. The first one, he says, sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, low, vulgar, the way of worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial. Now, here it is not denying sensual pleasure. That's fine. It's the pursuit of sensual pleasure. It's the indulgence in them, which is the problem. And then he says the pursuit of self-mortification, painful, ignoble, and unbeneficial. And this refers to the fact that if you can't make the distinction between pleasure and indulgence, enjoying and indulgence, you tend to be afraid of enjoying anything. Because if you're enjoying anything, you might be indulging, and that leads, of course, to more samsara, to more onward going, to more suffering. And of course, he practiced this in a severe sense by reducing the body, by just not eating until his body became quite weak. And he just didn't find it. What he says, it's painful, it's ignoble, not on the path, and it's not beneficial. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives vision, which gives knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, and to nibbana. That's the Eightfold Path. Now, this not veering to two extremes is not in the middle. It's not that you can have a bit of indulgence and a bit of self-mortification. It's your transcendent of it, right? You're not no indulgence and no self-mortification. And so that what he's pointing to is a way of living which doesn't have either of these two. And then later on, he says, he goes through them. He says that, the truth of dukkha, the truth of it, the diagnosis, and then the reason why there's dukkha. And he points specifically to the process of desire, this wrong sort of desire, which is either seeking happiness in pleasure, this indulgence, or is running away from what is suffering. Right? So that's where you get the aversion, pushing it away, or the fear. And when all that's overcome, there is a cessation of dukkha. And that, of course, is nibbana. So the prognosis is very good. And then the path leading to it is, of course, the Eightfold Path. And he says of each one of these, this is the noble truth of suffering. And then he says this has to be fully understood. So that's an intellectually understood, actually understanding why we're suffering. And then he says it's fully understood, right? And then he says the noble truth of the origin of suffering, right, which is desire. It goes deeper than that, actually. It goes to identification. But then he says that has to be abandoned. And the origin has been abandoned by me, right? Now, that has to be realized. That has to be practiced. And that's what we're doing when we're doing Vipassana meditation. We're allowing all these desires and aversions and fears to arise and pass away. That's the therapy of the practice, the heart therapy. And then he says that there's a noble truth that all that suffering disappears, all that stress, all that unsatisfactoriness disappears. And that has to be realized, and that he has realized it. And then finally, the way leading to the cessation of that suffering, which is the Eightfold Path. Now, just as a nice ending to that discourse, he said the group of five, remember he was talking first of all to the five companions who had been with him training for so many years. They were delighted in the Blessed One's statement, and while this discourse was being spoken, there arose in the Venerable Kondanya the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma. Whatever is subject to arising is all subject to ceasing. So Kondanya saw impermanence, anicca, at a very deep and fundamental level. Then the Buddha expressed his heartfelt sentiment and joy. Kondanya has really understood, Kondanya has really understood, and that's how the Venerable Kondanya came to be known as Anya Kondanya, the one who understands. Okay, so what does he mean when he talks about investigating this dukkha? So there are three types. The first one is called dukkha dukkha. So in other words, there is just the ordinary stress, unsatisfactoriness, discontent, and even severe suffering sometimes of life. But that itself is not the suffering that goes. That just comes with the body. That just comes with being a human being. Can't do much about it. That's part of our general karma, you might say. But we can stop the suffering that arises from that by not reacting. And that's, of course, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, shall we say, whenever we sit and meditate with what is unpleasant. And it's something that we have to take into daily life, right? It's not just that you sit and do it. It's just that whenever, for instance, you might wake up in the morning, not feel so well. So recognize your response to that. Are you being depressed? Are you getting angry with yourself? Are you fed up? See? And you have to wait for that to pass and just accept the fact that, well, I've got the flu, and that's all there is to it. There's no point in adding suffering to it by fighting the thing, by wanting it to be something else. I mean, that's what our desires are always doing. Even when we're happy, we want it to continue. Even when we're unhappy, we want to get rid of it. So we're always trying to manipulate the world we're in. And therefore, it creates constant conflict. Giving all that up immediately establishes a sense of calmness about things. The second one is viparinama dukkha, which is the suffering that's caused by change. So that's it, isn't it? Just when everything's absolutely perfect, you got the right job and the right partner and the right wife and husband, and the money's coming in, it's all wonderful, and then suddenly it all begins to disappear. So you get a sense of despair about life. And at the moment we're living in a society which is fairly stable, but you can imagine living in Ukraine just now, or even in Gaza, or in the Sudan. That's when they would really come across this viparinama dukkha. But it's also to do with allowing joy to come and to allow it to pass away. When you're enjoying a meal, to enjoy the meal, but then to recognize all the time that it is going to finish, right? So there's no anchoring for the same thing. Sometimes you have a party and then you say, oh, we must have another party. That's fantastic. But it's never the same. It's always a bit of a when you come to the next party, everybody's bored, right? It loses that spontaneity. You can't repeat anything in life. And of course, not being able to let go of what changes, the body as it grows older, other people whom we're connected to, whom we're deeply connected to, growing old and dying. See, if we're not open to that process, then of course we're forever grieving. We're ever being afraid and anxious that it's going to happen. So bringing that to mind all the time, that things are passing, just acknowledging that especially when things come to an end, we're very good at noticing beginnings. The new meal, the new holiday, the new fashion, the new music. We're always there at the beginning of things, but we never see the ending of it, because as it moves towards the end, the mind wants something new. Right? So we never know where these pop stars go. They sort of disappear. So it's a case of always being aware of ending of things, right? So when you finish something, even a phone call, even a piece of work, even the pots, washing the pots, just recognize that's finished, that's gone. It won't be repeated. It's disappeared completely. See? And then one gets into that habit of seeing that. And of course, it leads to an acceptance of the way life actually is, not as we would want it to be. And then finally, the third one is sankhara dukkha. So this is the suffering that's due to conditionality. And this is more, should we say, a slightly more subtle form of suffering, because it's all to do with karma, about dependent on causes and conditions. And there's nothing that we'll find in this body, in this mind, in this heart, or in this physical world that has any substance to it. Now we know that from our science, the physical world, it's just energy, for heaven's sake. Somebody once told me that if all this space in my body were taken away, I'd end up with a small cube of matter, or a small cube of whatever it is. So recognizing that there's nothing substantial. Secondly, that everything is dependent on something. Nothing has its own existence. And this is the problem with this sense of self that we have. It seems to have its own sort of sharp barrier. This is me and it's not you. But even now, I'm speaking and my words are entering into you and they're affecting what you're thinking. Your attention to me is affecting the way that I'm speaking. There's no separation, right? It's all sort of interwoven, intermelded. And so when we realize that, then our effort is to make that connection more harmonious, more beautiful, more loving, and so on and so forth. So when we recognize that everything is conditioned, everything is interdependent, and nothing has its own personal essence, our attitude begins to change. We're much more into openness towards other people and accepting them as they are. Sometimes it's not very pleasant, but that's not the matter. That's not the point. It's not to create barriers, more to create boundaries. Now, a boundary, if you think of a beach is sometimes the sea and it's sometimes the land. See, the beach isn't always just a beach. It's always moving. Its identity is always moving, and that's how we ought to be. We ought to be fluid in how we are relating to people. So those are the three meanings of dukkha, and of course they relate to the three characteristics of existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, stress or unsatisfactoriness, and not self. And that not self, remember, the other word the Buddha uses is shunya, which means empty, doesn't have any substance. And this was taken by the Mahayana to extend it out to everything. Everything is shunya. It's not just the human being, not just the sense of self. So the final note really is to bring us back to Vipassana and to point out that Vipassana is specifically the investigation of these characteristics, specifically, right? If we veer off that and try and heal the heart through, shall we say, some psychotherapeutic way, so we're more interested in, so we say, finding why we get headaches. So we might get headaches, and it may be that there's trauma in the body, trauma in the heart. So now that's to do with psychotherapy. Now, the heart will heal itself in Vipassana, but that's not our purpose. Our purpose is to see these three characteristics. And that doesn't mean to say that psychotherapy as a practice, as something to go to, is not worthwhile. It definitely is. Psychotherapy, people who go to psychotherapy for the most part get a lot from it. And these days you might come across the use of psychedelics to help people through trauma. So there's all sorts of ways through psychotherapy that the heart can be healed. But because you heal the heart of its trauma doesn't necessarily mean that you've seen these three characteristics. That's the distinction. So somebody might have, got some trauma up from childhood, and now they're not suffering from headaches. They feel more calm. They're not suffering from the consequences of that trauma, but they haven't had insight, which leads to nibbana. So that's the distinction that we have to be careful about, Just as the body needs special attention, like if the body needs medicines and it needs a certain type of process. So the heart and mind can be helped by psychotherapy. But the spiritual life, which is discovering what this nibbana element is through the process of investigating these three characteristics of existence. And the heart will heal itself in vipassana. There's no doubt about that. But it can take a long time. And sometimes psychotherapy can be of help. Very good. I hope my words have been of some assistance, that they have not caused confusion, and that by your practice you will be liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later. So I've gone over time a bit, but I think we've got 5 minutes to do a bit of meta practice. Yeah, is that all right? So again, just settling ourselves. Then just choosing whatever well wishes that we would normally choose. The ones I use, which tend to be fairly regular. May you be safe, well, and happy. May you live contented in harmony with the world. So we can bring to mind somebody who's helped us in our lives. That warms our hearts. And just as you picture them there in your mind's eye, drive your goodwill towards them. May you be safe, well, and happy. May you live contented in harmony with the world. We can bring to mind those who are near and dear to us. Friends, people at work, whomever we wish. Bringing to mind a neutral person, someone we see but don't know. Turning that stream of goodwill, loving kindness towards ourselves. we can bring into the heart someone we might be having difficulties with. Radiating outwardly, first of all, to each other, our present spiritual companions. Radiating outwardly towards our neighbors and neighborhood. To all the people in our country. All the peoples of Europe. All people on earth. And finally, to all beings in all directions. May all beings be happy. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sabe sata sukita hontu. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much. When I just realized when I say all the people in Europe, though you in America, all the people in the Americas.
Thank you. So anybody wants to ask any questions on the spot now, based on what Bhante has given this reflection today? Dharmasakya, you raise your...
Oh, I think Rose has raised one.
Okay. Rose.
Good evening, Jaha. Yes, my question is, when the master mentioned about the meditation heal the heart and the mind, which has been more in the case of used by psychotherapy, but how those can work out to become as a whole package to be able to attain the nirvana as well. So how would you classify or identify that? Because that can be worked as a whole package, right? My question is, can it be used as a whole package to attain nirvana at the same time, but then as well to heal the body and the heart?
Yeah, well, I mean, Vipassana does both, because every time you observe your hindrances, the hindrances are a consequence of past trauma and past unwholesome actions. So the more the hindrances are allowed to manifest and exhaust themselves, the heart is purifying itself. But we don't do it for that reason. That's what I was saying. We do it to see anicca, dukkha, anatta, you see. So the therapy happens by itself and is very cheap. You don't have to pay anything. But I was also saying that I know that many of my students also do psychotherapy with somebody, and it's very helpful. That's all. So that it doesn't stop you doing psychotherapy. It can be of help. That's all.
Thank you, Master.
Yeah, for the Buddha himself and all the early disciples, and even right really in the in most of the Buddhist countries in the East right now. I mean, nobody practices psychotherapy as such. Not that I know of. There might be some, but not much. I don't think you get psychotherapy in Burma. I don't remember, because it's all taken care of through the practice. This is a Western, shall we say, development. Yeah.
Now it's to my own case. I found that I start off with meditation, vipassana, but then I found in the process of my meditations that I found those psychotherapy sites which heal my heart and my mind at the same time. So that means it could start by one or another before and after, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you all know mindfulness and stress reduction and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So it's sort of crept into psychotherapy, and I don't, it's possible that through mindfulness and stress reduction, people actually begin to realize what's causing the problem on top of that is their relationship to suffering, and therefore they would perceive dukkha. See? And remember that the person who started all this off, Kabat-Zinn, he was a student of Sadhu Pandita. He's a Buddhist, you know. It's now, of course, being abused as usual. You know, it's like in companies, if you go along and say, "Look, I'm stressed," they say, "Well, go and do a week of meditation and stress reduction." It's not that you're overpiled with work. You know, it's not as though you've been given too much. You just need to do a bit of meditation. Well, God, it doesn't work. It's a bit of an abuse.
We have last Monday of the month, we have a mindfulness sessions at the Health Village. And half of them are normally referred because of the stresses at the work.
See, and it's the problem is often the work itself. They're being bullied, they're being pressured, etc., etc. You know, meditation isn't going to help you with that. I know.
Thank you, Master. My last question, please. So in the whole Western world, I have noticed that I have seen a lot of people, they cannot make a start through meditation. But is there any easy way for them to make a start instead to get into meditations? Because I think because of their daily life is very different to our Buddhist the practice in the monastery as part of our everyday life.
Yeah, well, I mean, all my students are lay people. They've all started, they all practice to some extent or another. Yeah. I mean, that's how I started. I was a lay person, you know. And I began, I remember sitting for 20 minutes was excruciating. It was like, it was really painful. It took some time to get used to it. I think people who come to meditation, so long as they find it, you know, helps them, even at the level of calming them down, you know, just being calm, they find it useful. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody?
Bhante, can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Yeah, but people who are Buddhists, so-called Buddhists, who are not interested in meditation, what can you do to make them realize that meditation is the only way to understand Buddha Dharma?
Well,
That's what I found.
yeah, well, I wouldn't be so absolute. I remember there's an eightfold. There's
But
an
how can
eightfold.
we encourage them that
Well,
you know?
remember it's an eightfold path, and there is such a thing as karma yoga. So, you know, devoting yourself to selfless action, you know, to helping people, etc., is also can open up you know, knowledge of interdependence, not self, things like that. But yeah, if you can encourage them to sit, then yeah. I wouldn't be so absolute about it, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're already 20 past, so
Yes.
We better stop here, and we'll see you next week again, same time. And in the meantime, continue practicing. And if you have any questions, do email. So then Bhante will elaborate next week. So until then, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bhante. Thank you everyone for participating in today's practice. So have a good night.